I asked her to marry me twice, and both times she said, "Not now." After the second rejection, I finally told her, "Then we're done." You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball so baffling, so utterly unjust, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty and commitment. I proposed to the woman I loved, twice, with all my heart, and both times she said no. But the real twist? The second she realized I was actually walking out for good, she screamed yes. I left anyway. Get comfortable because this one's going to make your blood boil. Nadia and I met at a party neither of us wanted to be at. Seriously, our friends practically dragged us there. If you'd told either of us that night that we'd spend the next 4 years together, we both would have just laughed. I was trying to look busy near the back, nursing a soda, half plotting my escape, when she just walked over. She started quietly making fun of the music, not to the whole room, just to me, like we had this secret, shared understanding about how terrible the playlist was. We talked all night. Easy, natural stuff. Bad movies, weird childhood memories, places that never lived up to the hype. She told the story about a family vacation that went sideways in the least dramatic but somehow funniest way possible, and I was genuinely losing it by the end of it. When people started heading out, I knew this wasn't just a normal conversation. I asked for her number. We were official a few weeks later. For the first couple of years, our relationship just worked. Nadia was sharp, funny, always in on the joke. She had this incredible way of paying attention, making you feel like whatever you were saying genuinely mattered. Not performative, just truly present. She remembered the little things, the name of a coworker I'd complained about once, what stressed me out about a project, what I'd ordered the first time we went to that restaurant. It sounds small, but that kind of attention adds up. You feel truly known, not just coexisting. We had enough overlapping tastes to make weekends easy, same movie preferences, same love for a quiet night in, and just enough differences to keep things from going flat. She pushed back when she disagreed, never just agreed to keep the peace. I respected that. The whole relationship had this low-drama quality that, watching other people's relationships implode, I'd learned was incredibly rare. We even had this dumb tradition for bad weeks. Order the worst delivery food, put on the most objectively terrible movie we could find, and just make fun of it all night. It was stupid, but it worked every single time. She was good at making the low points feel manageable without turning them into some heavy emotional processing session. I've thought about that specific thing more than once since all this happened. Honestly, for a long time, the day-to-day was just good. And that's the part that's so hard to explain to people on the outside who want a clear villain. She wasn't a bad person. She wasn't treating me badly. For most of those 4 years, our relationship was genuinely one of the best things in my life. That context matters, because it's what made the first proposal feel like a formality, not a gamble. And it's also what made the rejection hit so much harder than I ever expected. Around the 2-year mark, I started thinking about the future. Not the vague, "Yeah, someday we'll probably get married," thing couples say, because it's expected. No, I mean real mental plans. I started setting money aside for a ring, telling myself I'd wait until I felt financially solid. That felt responsible. I didn't want to propose and then stress about every expense while she was looking at venues. She deserved a real proposal, with a real plan backing it up. And what made me so confident was that we'd already talked about marriage directly. She told me she couldn't imagine being with anyone else, that she wanted to build something real. So when I finally started putting the first proposal together after a year of saving and planning, I genuinely wasn't sweating the outcome. It felt like a formality. A good one, sure, but still. I planned it at the beach where we'd had our first date. Just us. No crowd, no restaurant. No big production that felt more like a performance than a real moment. That first date, we'd been broke, packed a cheap picnic, talked until it got too cold. I wanted to bring it back to that. I timed it with sunset. Nadia always loved that hour, the sky turning all orange and pink. The weather cooperated. It was one of those perfect evenings. We walked the shore, just talking about our lives. I'd been carrying the ring in my jacket all day, reminding myself not to force it, just let the moment arrive. When it felt right, I stopped, took her hand, and said everything I'd been meaning to say for 2 years. How sure I was, how I didn't want to keep doing the almost thing. Then I got down on one knee and pulled out the ring. She looked at me for what felt like a full minute.
Just looked.
Then she said, "I want to marry you, just not right now." I stayed on one knee for a beat too long, my brain trying to process. "I want to marry you, but not right now." I forced a smile and mumbled something like, "Yeah, okay, I get it," because I didn't know what else to do, and I wasn't about to make a scene on the beach. She said she wasn't ready for the engagement stuff, that she needed more time. It just wasn't the right moment. No deeper explanation, no timeline, just those words. And a look on her face like she genuinely meant it, but also knew it wasn't what I was hoping to hear. We spent the rest of that evening pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. The whole drive home, I replayed every conversation about marriage, trying to figure out what I'd missed.
Was it me?
The timing? Did I not know her as well as I thought? I didn't ask her any of it, because I didn't want to seem like I was pressuring her. I smiled, we had dinner, and I told myself it was fine. And looking back now, I realized that phrase, "I want to marry you, just not right now," wasn't a rejection. But it wasn't a yes either. It was like a software update that installs for 9 months and never actually finishes. I was on one knee at sunset with a ring, and she basically submitted a pending request. And what made it worse? She'd been telling me for 2 years she couldn't imagine being with anyone else. So either she genuinely meant it and just wasn't ready, or she'd said everything a person says to keep someone in their corner without ever intending to follow through. Both of those are problems. We never talked about it after that night. I kept waiting for her to bring it up, for some conversation weeks later where she'd explain what "not right now" actually meant. Was it fear of commitment? A specific concern about me? Some timeline in her head I didn't know about? She never did. And I didn't push, trying to respect her pace. So we just went back to normal, trips, friends, the regular routine. On the surface, nothing changed. But it was always there in the background. Every engagement party, every proposal scene in a show, every time our parents asked about when we were getting married, I'd feel it again. That low-grade sting, right there under everything. I kept telling myself she just needed more time, that eventually something would click, and she'd come to me when she was ready. And for a while, I genuinely believed that. The relationship itself didn't fall apart. That's what made this whole period so confusing. We weren't fighting more. She wasn't pulling away. By almost every external measure, things were fine. But there's a real difference between a relationship building towards something and one just running on existing momentum. And somewhere around month 6 or 7, I started quietly feeling which one this actually was. I didn't let myself say it out loud, even to myself. I just kept going, kept explaining it away, kept stacking up reasons why everything was still okay. I remember one night at dinner with friends, one of the guys had just proposed. The whole table was talking about it. I watched Nadia's face. She was smiling, seemed genuinely happy for them. She glanced at me once, and I couldn't read it. Was she thinking about us? Was she uncomfortable? Was it nothing?
I didn't ask.
I just nodded along and changed the subject. That's where I was that whole year, reading things, not asking, filling in the blanks with whatever interpretation kept the peace. I spent too much time in my own head about it. Joel told me more than once. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she'd just panicked on the beach. Maybe a different setting. I built a whole collection of explanations for her over that year and held on to whichever one felt most comforting. Looking back, those 12 months are probably the part of this whole story I'm least proud of. Not the proposal, not the breakup, just those months of convincing myself it was fine when something in the back of my head already knew it wasn't. By the end of that year, I decided to try again. My thinking was, she'd never said she didn't want to marry me, just not yet. So maybe the problem was the setting. Too small, too quiet. Maybe she needed something with more weight. I decided to go the opposite direction. I booked a botanical garden. One of those places with stone fountains, rose arches, little lights strung through the hedges at night. Nadia's obsessed with plants. She has 20 of them crowded onto every available surface in our apartment, including several I've personally killed by forgetting to water them, which she has never fully let go of. I figured if any setting was going to feel right to her, it was that one. Actually, I should back up for a second. I remember standing at the kitchen counter eating cereal when I made the online reservation, and right behind me, her cat knocked one of the succulents off the windowsill. Third time that month with that specific plant. I just stood there looking at the dirt and thought, okay, sure. Anyway, I got our closest friends involved to help set up before we arrived. The plan was dinner at a nice restaurant nearby first, just us, then a walk over to the garden. She'd have no idea what was coming. Our friends came through, roses down the path, candles, the whole setup. It looked genuinely impressive, better than I'd pictured it. Dinner went smooth. We were both relaxed, laughing, good energy. I'd spent all day quietly catastrophizing, running through everything that could go sideways, but sitting across from her, it all settled down. She was in a great mood. I was trying to stay present and not give anything away. After we ate, I suggested a walk through the garden. She was in. We got to the fountain, and it was all there, exactly like I'd planned. She grabbed my arm when she saw the setup. I took that as a good sign. I did the speech again, told her I loved her, that I was sure, that I'd been ready for a while, and I wanted her to be too. Got down on one knee, pulled out the ring. She said, "Not just yet."
Seriously.
I was floored. Roses, candles, a stone fountain. Our closest friends had set the whole thing up, and she still said, "Not yet." It felt like preparing an incredible meal, plating everything perfectly, lighting candles, and someone saying they're not hungry. But then, the second you reach for the plate, they grab it and say, "Actually, wait." I stood up slowly. I asked her why. What was actually stopping her? I kept my voice even, but I wasn't hiding the frustration this time. She was crying, which I hadn't expected. She said the same things she'd said on the beach.
She needed more time.
She wanted to be sure things would work out. She just wasn't ready. I asked her if there was someone else, not accusingly, just it genuinely didn't track for me.
For years in. She shook her head.
No, there was nobody. Then I asked the question I should have asked a year ago on the beach. "Are you sure about me?" She looked at her hands. She didn't say a word. I'd been telling myself for a year that it was about timing, about the pressure of getting engaged, about needing to let her get there on her own terms. But standing in that garden, watching her go completely quiet when I asked if she was sure about me, that was different. That wasn't about timing or settings or the size of the proposal. That was something she didn't know how to say out loud. And her silence was saying it loud enough. We sat down near the fountain, and I asked her to actually help me understand what was happening because I'd given this everything, and I was struggling to figure out what else I was supposed to do. She said she did love me. She said she wanted to be with me. Then she said she just wasn't sure she was ready for the commitment of marriage and didn't want to rush into something she wasn't certain about. That's when it landed clearly. She wasn't uncertain about marriage in the abstract.
She was uncertain about me.
Those are two completely different conversations, and we'd apparently been having the wrong one for over a year. I sat with that for a moment before I said anything. Part of me was still holding out hope she'd say something that made sense, some explanation that would reframe the whole thing in a way I could work with. But there was nothing. She was looking at me with real emotion on her face, and still couldn't give me an answer to the simplest question I'd asked. Not about the proposal, not about the ring, just, "Are you sure about me?" And the silence after that question was the most honest thing she'd said all night. I told her I couldn't keep doing this, that after 4 years and 2 real attempts, I wasn't going to sit in a relationship indefinitely, waiting for her to decide I was worth committing to. She started crying harder and said, "Fine, I'll marry you. Please don't leave." And I know she meant it in that moment. I genuinely do. But she only said it because she thought I was walking out. That's not a yes. That's damage control with a ring attached to it. I didn't want her to marry me because she was scared of losing me. I wanted her to want it, to be genuinely excited, not just willing to agree to stop a loss. Those are two completely different things, and I wasn't going to pretend they weren't. I walked away from the garden. The next few days were rough, in a specific way. I stayed at Joel's place. Joel's one of those guys who doesn't turn things into a moment. He just makes room, hands you a soda, and puts something mindless on TV without asking 20 questions. We played video games, watched something dumb, and I tried not to let my head go to dark places. It helped more than I expected. just to be somewhere not surrounded by 4 years of accumulated shared life. The first night, I barely slept. Not spiraling, exactly, just my brain wouldn't quiet down. I'd lie there, going through the whole timeline, the beach, the year of silence, the garden, trying to figure out at what point I should have made a different call. I didn't land on one. And I think that's how I knew I'd made the right choice. When you've actually screwed something up, you can usually find the exact moment. This one, I kept coming back to the same place. I did what someone does when they love a person and want to build something real. The outcome wasn't what I wanted, but the decisions were mine, and I'd make most of them again. Nadia and I weren't talking. She stayed at our apartment and I didn't go back. Then the texts started rolling in. Not from her at first, but from her friends. Then her parents. Then some of our mutual people who'd clearly gotten her version of events which, from what I could piece together, went roughly like, he ended things because I wasn't ready to get married. Technically not wrong. Missing about half the actual picture. I got called selfish. Immature. One person sent a long message about how I was throwing away a 4-year relationship over one small thing, apparently unaware we were now 2 occurrences deep, and I'd also just asked her point blank if she was sure about me and gotten dead silence. Another person told me I was scared of commitment, which is a remarkable read of the situation, given that I had proposed twice in 13 months. Ashley's message was the most revealing. You were just a safe bet for her. She'll find someone better now. I didn't respond. It sat with me for a day, and then I realized it wasn't designed to hurt me. It was designed to reframe everything, to make Nadia the one who'd made a power move, rather than the one who'd fumbled something real. And also, reading between the lines, it quietly answered a question I'd been circling for a while, without fully wanting to land on it. My own guys were a different conversation entirely. Joel kept it straightforward. She couldn't decide in 4 years? She wasn't going to. Matt was blunter. He thought I should have walked after the beach. Said the first proposal gave me everything I needed to know. He wasn't wrong. I just hadn't been in a place to hear it 12 months earlier. I'd wanted to believe she just needed more time, that if I was patient and didn't push, she'd get there on her own. That's a generous interpretation. I held on to it a lot longer than I should have. The calls from Nadia kept coming. I answered eventually. She wanted to work it out. Come home. Said she'd been wrong to hesitate. I told her I heard her, but that a yes that arrived the moment she thought she was losing me wasn't the kind I was looking for. We both went quiet on the phone for a minute. Then we said our goodbyes. About 10 days after the botanical garden, I got one last text from her. Short, no drama. I understand now.
I'm sorry.
I hope you find someone who makes you happy. No more calls, no more texts from her friends. Just silence after that. I went back to the apartment when I knew she wouldn't be there. Packed what was mine, left my key on the counter, and walked out. It took about 40 minutes. 4 years down to 40 minutes and a key on a counter. The first few weeks in my own place were an adjustment. I found a 1-bedroom in a decent part of town. Nothing remarkable, just mine. I could leave dishes in the sink because I felt like it. Stayed up too late watching things I'd been wanting to watch for years. Slept in the middle of the bed. Sounds small until you realize how much of your physical space you quietly give up during a long relationship without ever tracking it. What takes longer than people usually talk about is the mental recalibration. When you've spent 4 years with your daily routine partly organized around another person, their schedule, their preferences, the shape of your evenings because of what she had going on, suddenly having no one else's rhythm to account for feels both good and genuinely disorienting. I'd catch myself about to say something out loud, and then remember I was the only one in the room. Not in a sad way, just jarring. You get used to the texture of another person's presence, and then one day it's just gone, and the quiet feels different. The question I kept coming back to was what I actually wanted now. Not from a relationship, I wasn't even thinking about that yet. Just from my own life, my own days. I'd been so focused on the future I thought we were building that I hadn't really looked at what I wanted, separate from that plan, for a couple of years. I started small. Made a list of things I'd been putting off. Hit the gym with actual consistency because I had real free time now and needed somewhere to put the energy. Got into a work rhythm that was clean and focused. None of it groundbreaking, just getting my own footing back under me. Joel checked in regularly. Matt and I started hanging out more than we had in years. The weird moments weren't the obvious emotional ones. You brace for those, and they come and go. The ones that caught me off guard were the random, quiet ones. Opening the fridge and only thinking about what I felt like for dinner. Driving somewhere with no need to check in. Waking up on a Saturday with a fully empty schedule and nobody to negotiate with about what to fill it with. Those took longer to feel normal than I expected, but they did eventually. The thing about going through something like this is that at a certain point, the processing stops being about the other person and starts being about yourself. Like, what do you actually want? Not just from a relationship, but from your life in general. I'd been so attached to a specific picture of the future that I hadn't really looked at the individual pieces clearly in a while. When I finally did, some of them looked different than I remembered. That part was worth something, even if I could have done without the way I got there. I also stopped explaining it to everyone who asked. That helped more than I expected. For the first month, every time someone asked what happened, I'd give this whole detailed rundown. The beach, the garden, the silence. And every time I told it, I'd feel the whole thing again, fresh. At some point, I just started saying, "We broke up. It was the right call." And leaving it there. Turns out that's enough of an explanation for most people. And the ones who push for more detail don't actually need it. They're just curious. Cutting those conversations short saved me a lot of energy. A few months in, Joel called and said we needed to get out and do something. Just pool, sodas, catch up, nothing heavy. We hadn't done a proper hangout in a while. I said fine. The night started easy. We shot pool, talked about nothing requiring much thought, just the kind of back and forth that happens naturally with someone you've known long enough that conversation doesn't need effort. I wasn't thinking about anything heavy, and then about an hour in, Joel got this specific look on his face while I was lining up a shot. He said, "Hey, so Nadia's here." I went still for a second. Then I glanced over, as casual as I could. She was at the bar with a guy, leaned toward each other, laughing at something. It looked comfortable, easy. I stood there with the pool cue in my hand for maybe 3 full seconds, and then looked back at Joel, who was watching me like he had some kind of contingency plan ready to deploy. I shrugged. "Let's keep playing," I said, and I meant it. Seeing her didn't wreck me the way part of me had been quietly bracing for. There was something there, yes. Not jealousy, more like that low, quiet ache that shows up when you recognize that something is genuinely, completely over. Not technically on paper. Actually over.
Done.
We finished the game. I didn't look back over again. When we called it a night, I went home and sat on the balcony with a soda and just let the whole evening settle over me. It wasn't heavy. I wasn't spiraling, wasn't reconstructing timelines, wasn't asking myself where it went wrong. It was just done. And I was okay. There's a version of this story where that bar scene hits me harder, where I go home and spend the next 3 weeks in my head about it. And honestly, 2 months earlier, I think it would have. The fact that it didn't told me more about where I actually was than anything else had. You don't always get clean closure moments. Usually, you just sort of notice one day that you stop needing one. I don't know if Nadia ever figured out what she was actually waiting for. Maybe she did. Maybe the guy at the bar is exactly who she needed, and she'll know right away with him. Maybe she'll still be not quite ready 2 years from now, and he'll find himself somewhere familiar. That's not mine to track anymore. What I do know is that I didn't miss anything obvious. I wasn't oblivious to red flags. There weren't any, not in the traditional sense. She wasn't dishonest. She wasn't pulling away or treating me badly or checking out of the relationship in ways I could point to and say, "There it is." She just couldn't answer one question. "Are you sure about me?" And whatever the reason for that, fear, uncertainty, something she never let herself say out loud. It was hers to own, not mine to fix. Some people will say I should have had more patience. Okay, but patience has a point where it stops being a virtue and starts being avoidance. I'd hit that point somewhere around the time I was planning a second proposal instead of having an honest conversation about why the first one got turned down. I did this the way I knew how, and I do most of it again. What I wouldn't do again is spend a year pretending the silence was fine. What I know about myself now is that I'm not someone's safe bet. I'm not a placeholder or a backup plan or a holding pattern until something better comes along. I'm not going to wait in a relationship for years, hoping somebody eventually decides I'm worth committing to. She had 4 years and 2 real, honest attempts to say yes. She didn't. The panic yes at the end, the one she pulled out the second she thought I was walking away for good, that wasn't an answer. That was fear. And fear doesn't build anything. I made the right call. It took a while to feel that clearly, but I do. Still figuring out what comes next, but I'm moving. That's enough for right now. So tell me, what would you have done after that first not right now on the beach? Would you have stayed, hoping she'd come around, or would you have walked away then and there? Drop your take in the comments. I really want to know what you think.